Hello friends, welcome back to part 3 of Go Agile. Hope you're all doing well. So last time we reviewed the traditional model and also covered Agile Manifesto, which is nothing but the 4 Agile values and 12 Agile principles. If you are watching this, either you are involved in Agile in some fashion or the other, or trying to learn and become an Agile resource. In any case, you will constantly be bombarded with thoughts of, is this worth it? Or it's more of hype? And is it really true what people say? And so on. And you know, we like gossip, right? So you might run into the discussion of Agile myths somewhere or the other. So let's quickly see what are some of those common Agile myths in the marketplace. Myth 1. Agile is a silver bullet. I wish it's true, but no, it's not. You can fail just as commonly as you fail in any traditional method. In fact, you can fail faster in Agile. If you wonder why, we will talk enough about it in the upcoming sessions. So park your thoughts. Bottom line, it's not a silver bullet. Myth 2. Agile means no documentation. Agile doesn't mean there is no documentation. Instead of building a large requirements document, you will break it into tiny stories, tasks, and focus is only for the upcoming sprint of 2 weeks or so. When you get to next sprint, you may have new stories or stories already planned. Point is, you have the flexibility to change quite a bit if required. You are not locked into a large requirement document because you already wrote, like in the case of traditional projects. By the way, I'll keep using the word sprint. Don't get confused. Later, we will be talking a lot about sprints. In a nutshell, a sprint for now, just imagine a sprint is the short cycle of development, which is generally 2 to 4 weeks. But 2 weeks is becoming standard in most of the places. Once a project is over, and if you look back, there will be lots of documentation that would have progressively been built through features, stories, tasks, etc. 3. Agile means no planning. Again, this is not wrong. Don't get confused that in the previous waterfall model, we spoke about planning being a bottleneck. There is some difference in what we consider planning there versus here. In Agile, planning is broken up and happens in multiple ways and multiple places. You are not planning for the next 1 year. Rather, planning is all for short term. That's the biggest difference. So in Agile, we do daily stand-ups. In a way, we plan for what you're doing that day. We do iteration planning once every 2 weeks. Then if you go to more matured Agile environments, you do a planning session every 3 months. So there is certainly planning in Agile. Number 4, implementing Agile is easy and also difficult. So some may say implementing Agile is easy and some may say it's difficult. Fundamentally, if you don't learn to ride a bicycle, it's tough. But once you learn, it's easy. If you learn only to some extent, chances are you will ride for some time and you can fall anytime. But if you learn fully, then riding is a cakewalk. So you will hear this complaint from people who are in the initial stages and who are struggling to implement or who started implementing but then they are implementing it in the wrong way. Number 5, Agile is undisciplined. This complaint came in mainly from some of the companies. When they started Agile, they selectively tried out Agile, like doing the daily meetings, but ignoring some of the tougher tasks, such as regularly releasing software in a cadence, because that needs a lot more discipline. But the myth came out that Agile is undisciplined through that. But Agile is very disciplined method where you test, integrate, do demos, get feedback, and so on, and at a regular cadence. Number 6, Agile is new. Well, no, Agile is certainly not new. Agile methods have been around for a long time. The frameworks that are now known collectively as Agile mainly evolved in the late 80s and 90s, which means Agile is mature and an approach that is inherently familiar to many people. Back in the day, we used to call development in spirals, which are also short, maybe 3 months at best, produce a tangible software regularly, get feedback, then improve and move on. So Agile has been there for quite some time. The only thing is it's now a lot of different frameworks have come under Agile. Number 7, Agile replaces everything that existed before. No, that's wrong. Even now there are companies which still continue on waterfall methods. In certain engineering and manufacturing areas, still waterfall model is used. We can go on adding any number of myths, but this is just to get an idea on some of the myths in the industry. Let's now quickly look at how a traditional model differs with Agile from a functional perspective. Now you might have seen this picture already. So the left side shows a typical traditional model project where you do a lot of planning upfront, scope the entire project, and you know what you're planning to build. You know how long it will take, what resources you need, how much it costs, and so on. Which means predominantly your entire project is dependent on the scope, what you're building, that is the features. Now on the way, when you introduce any changes, That's a big deal. Discussions, negotiations, change orders, all that happens. And result is there will be significant changes to overall time and costs. Because when you first wrote the scope, let's say you thought it will take 1 year and $1 million for your project. Now with the changes you introduced in between, it's now 1 year and 4 months and the cost is perhaps $1.4 million. Just I'm quoting some rough numbers. Then they say, oh, project failed. They didn't meet the timelines, cost overruns. And even they say sometimes, oh, they didn't understand the scope. They did wrong requirements. And all that also results in the same negative impact of cost and time, right? So that's how the features are shown on the top as fixed, while cost and time below are shown as variables. So what does it tell us? Changing requirements in a traditional model is treated as a sign of failure. Agree? Now, on the other hand, you see the right side picture, how it is on the agile projects. The basic principle is that the scope is never fixed. You are not working with a certain set of features in mind. You are leaving the flexibility of changing scope as you want. At any given point, you are setting the time for a particular piece of your software to be developed as 2 weeks or 3 weeks and so on. Shorter time frames. So you know exactly how much time you have in hand, how much it costs for this period, and now you plan. See, I'm using the word planning here also. So you plan exactly what part of the software you want to build in the next 2 weeks or 3 weeks or 4 weeks, whatever. Let's do one thing. Rather than referring to this 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks every time, let's just call it sprint. That's easy, right? By the way, we also use the word iteration to refer to sprint. Both are same, so don't get confused if I use one word for the other. At least for now, they both should mean the same to you. Anyways, since you know the time and costs upfront for each sprint, that remains same, and sprint after sprint you can always change your features, but you know your base cost for each sprint is going to be the same. And at a high level, you think a project may take 20 sprints, you know how much cost it's going to take and how long it will take for 20 sprints, right? But again, in Agile, the difference is we don't really do the complete planning and documenting everything for your let's say the full project, which could be like 20 sprints, because progressively we are making changes. We have we kept the flexibility to accommodate any changes. Now, there are a lot of people who debate that this is not strictly true in real world. Well, that confusion is always there. But for now, let's not debate about why and how and all this, but rather just simply, I think, as a very base concept, let's just keep this in mind and move on. The signers of the Agile Manifesto recognize that scope change is natural and beneficial. Agile approaches specifically embrace change and use it to make better informed decisions and more useful products. That's the bottom line. Okay friends, now that we looked at several aspects of traditional and agile separately, let's quickly look at some of the differences at one place so we can understand the perspective a little better and in a broader context. So in the traditional model, the development and delivery process is more of sequential, where each phase needs to be completed in order to go to the next phase. Whereas in Agile, it's time boxed. Basically, it's iterative or incremental product development and delivery. In the traditional, requirements and design decisions are made upfront. Whereas in Agile, product owners and development teams have the opportunity to negotiate and reprioritize requirements throughout the development process. In traditional, months of planning happens before development begins. In Agile, like not so much of long-term planning is required. It's more of intermediate milestones. You deliver in deployable increments with useful features. It may have minimum viable product functionality. In traditional, it's broken into stages that need to be completed before you can go to the next. Whereas in Agile, there is complete transparency in development process. Each iteration or sprint delivery is done when it's programmed, tested, and so on. So that's what we call the working software in regular intervals. In traditional, the customer sees the product for the first time when final product is delivered. And in Agile, customer is constantly interacting with product and providing feedback and able to see the progress, how the product is coming up. In traditional, making changes that too late in the process can be very expensive and time consuming. In Agile, changes are embraced in the iterative process through constant communication and prioritization. In traditional, only one initial investment to be spread out over the project timeline. Whereas in Agile, it's an incremental investment process where money is released with phases. So you're not locking in for the big bang approach on certain projects. So if you observe, we made sure that we repeated enough of some of these basic concepts multiple times over the last 3 episodes, and I did it for a purpose, because the more and more you hear in different formats, it really helps you to understand the underlying concepts. which helps you later as we move forward. And this should give you a good grasp of some of the very basic things about Agile. So with that, we conclude this Go Agile 3, and we will meet again soon in Go Agile 4. Till then, stay safe and do good. See ya.